Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to show you guys how we can set up SAML 2.0 for our user logins to Kibana. So stick around and we'll jump into it. And alright, so in this video we're going to be configuring SAML 2.0 to handle our authentication within Kibana. So currently we just have a basic user and password that we're using to log into our Kibana web UI that we have here. And what we can do, and actually what is a feature that OpenSearch allows us to take advantage of, where it's actually a paid for service with the Elastic Basic license. So we can actually authenticate with an IDP provider using SAML 2.0, which is really nice. So now if you have customers or internal users that want to integrate Kibana and Elasticsearch with SAML, we have the ability to do that. So in this video, I'm going to set up a SAML 2.0 app within Okta. Okta is a pretty popular IDP provider, and so I have a free trial version with them, so I'm able to demo for you guys. I'm then going to configure OpenSearch to use the IDP provider. So for example, we'll use the entity ID, we'll point to the metadata URL, and that'll become clear as we move along. And then we will log into Kibana with the SAML user. So let's go ahead and jump into it. On the GitHub here, I have, which I'll link down in the description, I have some commands and config settings that we'll go through as we go through this demo. So if you want to follow along, you can go ahead there. So I mentioned I'm going to use Okta for my IDP provider, and so what I'm going to do is I have logged in as the admin through the admin portal here. If you do have to log in through the admin portal to create a new application, so I'm going to go into applications here. I'm then going to select Create App Integration, and here we have a few different sign-on methods that we can use. In this example, we're going to use SAML 2.0, so we'll go ahead and select that guy. We will select Next. I will give it a name. I'll just say please subscribe, and I won't worry about a logo or anything. And now we're coming into our configuration of SAML. So first we'll have a single sign-on URL. So this will actually be the endpoint of Kibana and where Kibana is listening. So if we go back into the GitHub here, you see that we'll need to enter this in for the below single sign-on URL. So I'll go ahead and copy and paste this guy here. And actually, let me throw that in a notepad and then just replace. So this file path will always be the same for everyone. However, this base URL, of course, is going to be different. So I've created a DNS entry to point this domain name to my server running Kibana, which is this guy here. So I will copy this domain. And if I go back into my Notepad, I'll paste that there. And then we can put the port if we want, even though HTTPS defaults to 443. But then make sure you have the /_OpenDistro security SAML ACS. So this will be the endpoint where Okta will post to. So upon authenticating my user, it'll then post to this URL. So I'll erase that. And this URL, of course, is something that Kibana will be listening for. All right, so that looks good. We then have to do a audience URI. This can be whatever you want. You'll just have to match it with what you set within your OpenSearch config as well. So in this demo, I'm just going to call it Kibana-SAML. And again, this can be anything you want. You just need to make sure that you just need to make sure to whatever value you set it to, it's also the same within your entity ID. The audience URI is just another way to say entity ID. They're the same. All right, and that looks good. And now, we need to set a role. So we're setting a group attribute statement. So what we'll do is we'll basically tie the ID. We're going to tie the user to a group, and that whatever that group is will tell Elasticsearch and Kibana what resources they can access. So we're able to assign roles to users, and based upon the user and what role they have, will determine what functions they can do within the Kibana UI. So if we go into group attribute statement, again, I'm going to just call this roles. So I'm going to call this roles. I'll leave it at unspecified. That's fine. And then I'm actually going to do a match regex of a wildcard. So that'll just be, it'll match on everything. Again, if you want to be more specific, you could say, we could create roles within Elasticsearch that is like InfoSec, and we could create another role called like DC Ops or something like that, to where, and then assign those roles to users, so that if you want to limit what certain groups of people can see, that's a good way to do it. But in this case, I'm just going to do a wildcard. We will then hit next. And yeah, and so that's really, we'll go ahead and hit next, and really that's all we need to do for configuration. I'll just say that, and it's internal, okay, and then finish. And now what we should get is what we'll get is our IDP metadata. So if I select this guy, we see now we have a link. So this is we now have a URL that contains our IDP metadata, which we'll set in a sec, that will give all of the metadata around this SAML 2.0 settings. So it'll give us the entity IDs, some cert and key information, some binding information, and again, this is important, so OpenSearch knows details around the SAML 2.0 config that you're setting. So we should be done within the Okta config, so that all looks good. Actually, what I am going to go ahead and do is assign a user to this app. So go sign on, or maybe assignments. Yeah, here we go. So if I go assign to people, I'll assign it to the please subscribe user. Oh, I clicked the link. That's annoying. Let's see where we at. Please subscribe. Assignments. Assign to people, and I will select assign. Username, yeah, info. Yep. And okay, so that looks good. All right, and now that's assigned. So good. So now let's configure OpenSearch and Kibana. So what we'll need to do is open the config.yaml for the security settings. So here is my OpenSearch server. So I will cd into user, share, Elasticsearch, plugins, open distro, _ security, security config. All right, so we'll cd into here. I'll ls, and here we have our config YAML. Oh, Nano hit me again. Son of a bitch. Some again. All right, so let's open the config.yaml, and you'll see a lot. You'll see this auth-c block. So these are different authentication mechanisms that OpenSearch supports. So again, the current one that we're currently using is the just basic internal auth domain. So this is using the internal users database, which is stored within Elasticsearch. But what we want to do is, and you can see you can also set up for LDAP, but what of course we want to do is set up for SAML. You'll notice a SAML block actually isn't here. I don't know why they don't include it by default, because it is something that they support, but it's not within the config file. I'm not totally sure why. So I'm going to copy this, and what I'm going to do is actually, so I'm going to copy everything below just the auth-c start. So I'll copy that, and then I'll just remove everything. So I'll go ahead and remove all the way down until we have the auth-z. So make sure you don't erase the auth-z, because that's a separate block. So we'll go ahead and paste what we copied. I can go ahead and clean that up. That looks okay. And all right, so let's start to walk through it. So first, you'll see we have we set an order. So this order is the order that Kibana follows to, in Elasticsearch follows to do a login. We have to have the basic internal auth one, and we have it set to 0. And we have it set to 0. So what Kibana is going to do is just jump directly to the SAML authentication that we have set here. You can see we have it enabled, and there's a few other kind of metadata settings, but you don't really need to worry about those. What we need to worry about now is our IDP, all the contents within this block here. So I'm first going to point to my metadata URL. So I'm going to erase this value, and that's going to be this value here. So I'm just going to copy this. You can also write it out to a file and then store the file locally on the Elasticsearch server if you want to. But I'm just going to use the URL. We then have the entity ID block. So I will erase this value here that's within our examples, and I will paste the entity ID that's within our SAML config that we're loading to as well. I don't know why this is required, because the contents of the entity ID are within this metadata file. So I don't know why it's required, but it is. And that value is there. We then have our entity ID, and again, this refers back to what we set. So I set that to Kibana-SAML. So if you use the same thing, then you can just say Kibana-SAML. If that's different, then you'll set it to whatever you configured within your Okta app. We're then going to point to the Kibana URL. So that will be this guy here. So I'll just copy that. Paste that here. We then have our roles key. So again, we set that value to roles. So we'll leave that here. And then we need to set our exchange key. So let me put this on the next line here, and I'll just throw it there. So the SAML protocol will use this key to pass the request between the IDP provider, which is Okta, and Kibana. So it's not having to pass my user credentials with every request. It uses this key to do that. And this is just a HMAC 256 value, and this can be whatever string of characters that you want. So I'm just going to generate a random one. So if I just go to this website here, I'll do a text of please subscribe, and then I'll do a secret key of please subscribe. 256 is fine. I'll compute that hash, and then I will copy and I will paste that value here. So that looks good. So again, we're pointing to our metadata URL. We are pointing to our entity ID, which will be a field that's within your metadata file. Again, that will be here. We then specified the SP entity ID, which again is just the Kibana-SAML. Then we point to our Kibana URL, so we're telling the IDP provider, hey, Kibana will be here, so you're going to forward the user there after authenticating them. We have our roles key, which is set to the roles field. And then we have our exchange key, which again is just a randomly generated string of characters. So that looks good. So I'll go ahead and save that. And now what we need to do is we need to reload this file with this command. And so we do not need to create one. Metadata URL. Oh, error seems config.yaml is not in the format. Mapping values are not allowed here in reader. Okay, so it's complaint. Okay, so that's better. That's progress. It tried to run, so let's look up the what it's complaining about. So it doesn't like the colon there. IDP meta. Maybe I need a backspace. Let me look at what they have set up. IDP. Okay, so here we have something like this. Minimal configuration example. Okay, let's try that. Maybe it's really picky about how the syntax is set up. So I will do the IDP, and then I'll just bring this value down. So that's my metadata URL. There's no double quotes or anything. So we have metadata URL, and then I'll bring down the entity ID. So I'll give every variable its own line, I guess. So then we have the SP. So that's here. And then bring this down. And so, okay, yeah, that's our. Okay, so we have that down, and then we'll bring down our Kibana URL. Then I'll bring down the roles key. And then we have exchange key. Okay. I guess I'll move these back a few just in case it is that picky. Okay. And all right, let's try that again. Okay, there we go. Okay, it looks like we made progress. All right, done with success. Okay, sweet. All right, so that should be good now. So if we go back into our instructions, now, and so that has restarted Elasticsearch with this new config. So we don't need to restart Elasticsearch. We will have to make a config change to Kibana though. So if we open up our Kibana.yaml, we can just scroll down to the bottom here. First, we're going to state that the auth type that we're going to use is going to be SAML. So I'll copy, paste that guy there. And then we need to whitelist the file paths that we specified within our sign-on URL, right? Because Okta now is going to, when it authenticates me, it's going to then post to this path here, to this URL path here. So we need to tell Kibana, hey, whitelist those paths so that it accepts connections, so that it accepts posts from Okta. So I will paste that there. Okay, and then let's go ahead and do a restart. So I'll do a systemctl restart Kibana, and we'll cross our fingers. I do a status Kibana, just make sure that it's listening. Okay, that looks good. All right, so now, hopefully, if we reload this, hopefully we'll be redirected to our IDP provider. And so we have a unauthorized. Let's see what's going on within the logs. Oh, it's because, oh wait, the IDP, in order to show these. So here we, okay, so here we see it loading the SAML config. So that looks good. New metadata successfully loaded. Okay, good. Next refresh cycle. IDP does not provide a single logout service. Oh yeah, that should be fine. Okay. So now let me actually try that within an incognito window. So I'll go to my demo. Oh, what did I call it? OpenSecure. OpenSecure.co. And okay, good. Now so after generating a new session, my browser was trying to cache my credentials, so it was failing. But now you can see we are now been redirected to my IDP URL that I have. So now I need to authenticate with Okta. So I'll go ahead and do info@opensecure.co and the password. And if I sign on, I should be authenticated and then redirected. Okay, so I am, but we get a server error. Okay, maybe I should remove the port 443. It looks like it's still trying to use that. Okay, so let me go back to yeah, this guy. Hopefully I can make that change without having to create a new app. If we go into next, is that part of my? I guess it shouldn't unless it creates a new metadata file. So I guess we'll see. So okay, I'll remove that. Roles, yeah. Okay, that all looks good. I'll just say next, and yep, finish. And let's see if it created a new metadata file. Oh. Doesn't look like it. No. Okay, it hasn't. Okay, good. All right, so let's try that again. I'll open up a incognito window again. I'll go to HTTPS. My demo.opensecure.co, and okay, we're directed to our login, and I'll say info@opensecure, give my password, and all right, we're in. So now, oh, and that's fine. Now we just need to select switch tenants, and I'll just say my private one. And then it'll reload, and now we're able to see everything and interact with Kibana, right? And so a few things happened there, right? We tried to go to mydemo.opensecure.co. We then configured Kibana and Elasticsearch to use a IDP provider for the SAML 2.0 protocol, right? So Kibana sees that. It then reaches out to my IDP provider, which in this case is Okta, and Kibana says, "Hey, I see a new user is trying to log in. I'm going to reach out to you as my IDP provider." So we then get redirected to the Okta IDP, which is just this opensecure.okta.com. So I get redirected to that to do my authentication. I do my username and password, and Okta verifies me. So now we can control users within the app, right? So So if I go into assignments, and let's actually remove me from being able to log in. So if I remove this, and then yeah, it looks like that's been saved. And let me create a new session. So it's asking me to log in. So now if I do info at opensecure.co, and now if I try to log in, you see my user account hasn't been added to this app. So now Okta is stopping me from being able to log in Kibana before I'm even able to interact with Kibana at all, right? Like we're not presented the Kibana login. And so now you can control user access to Kibana and to your Elasticsearch cluster with an IDP provider. And so now what's happening is Kibana and Elasticsearch are trusting Okta or whatever IDP provider that you use to do the authentication. So assuming that, so then taking a step back to when we successfully logged in, we tried to go to mydemo.opensecure.co. We weren't logged in yet, so we got redirected so Kibana redirected us to Okta. We then authenticated with Okta. Okta said, yep, you are a user assigned to this application, so I'm going to now forward you to mydemo.opensecure.co, where Kibana is listening on. And because Okta has authenticated us, Kibana is going to blindly trust it. So Kibana and Elasticsearch, when you have SAML authentication set up, once you authenticate with the IDP provider, Kibana and Elasticsearch are going to trust it, and allows organizations to now control user access to Kibana and to Elasticsearch through their IDP provider, which is a really nice feature to have. And I think that wraps it up for today's video. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one.